Whilst the gameplay you're about to see is from a story mission that features a boss, there will be no major story spoilers. Now then guys, I got access to Borderlands 4 early and there's a lot to cover, but for the next few days I'm going to be showcasing each of the Vault Hunters with some level 30 gameplay, and the gameplay is from a specific mission called Rush the Gate, which is in the Fadefield zone. I left it as late as possible to complete and play this mission because it's part of the preview content, but I want it to be as high level as possible so I could show off augments, capstones, that kind of stuff. But to be clear on this video, this isn't endgame content. This video also isn't a guide for Rafa, albeit I'll be doing those videos in the future, so do like and subscribe. And I won't be talking about how good Rafa was for leveling or doing specific content and what skill trees are good, etc, etc. All I'll be talking about is how they played within this mission area and showing off the augments and abilities that I've been using, as well as the capstones. For the other Vault Hunters, you could decide which one I start showing off tomorrow, and there's a couple of other details that I wanted to include in the commented description below, so please have a look. But let's get started, let's get stuck in. Because I'm level 32, it does allow me to show off pretty much all of the augments for some of the trees and some of the capstones as well, so I kind of want to do a run through and show gameplay of each whilst I'm doing this level. We'll start off with the red tree, which is Remote Agent, and the ability, the base one, is Peacebreaker Cannons, where you equip these big shoulder-mounted cannons that fire at enemies in front of you, dealing kinetic gun damage, so no elemental focus yet at least. They can also focus on a particular target if you press the mouse button down on mouse and keyboard, and it will lock onto them as you ping them, which is cool, and a lot of other Vault Hunters have this kind of kit too, as we'll get onto. And you can also end the cannons early and you'll be refunded part of the action skill cooldown. The duration at base level is 20 seconds, or 18 seconds just below 20, and the cooldown is 35 seconds. You can put talents into making the duration longer based on doing crit damage, which is what I've done, or you can reduce the cooldown in various bits of ways. But the other thing that you could do is, of course, get augments. As you level up, you go through the tree, you'll have access to these augment abilities that can change up how Peacebreaker Cannons, in this case, fundamentally works in some instances. So again, because I'm level 30 plus on all of the characters so far, it's been a good chance to show off the augments, starting with Instinto, where the Peacebreaker Cannons deal increased critical hit chance, 25% just off the rip. But if you press the action skill again whilst the cannons are active, it will cause them to double their critical hit chance, and you will gain increased critical hit damage off the cannons too, but it will drain the duration of the cannons a lot faster. You can press this multiple times to get multiple stacks, maxing out at 10 total, and you can see in the bottom left where all of the other buffs are, where the Instinto augment is showing up and how many stacks that you have. The stacks last about 8 seconds and then they start to like rescind over time, but they rescind one at a time, as you see, and so it goes from like 8 stacks to 7 stacks, etc. And also, if you get a kill whilst the action skill is active, you will get it basically reset the duration of it, but it will drain faster too, so you can keep it going. And it's a really like fun playstyle, as you've been seeing, to try and get as many stacks as possible but not run out of the Peacebreaker Cannons being enabled and being able to work with. Bullet Buddy Deluxe is the other augment next to it. When the cannons are active, Rafa and his allies regenerate ammo in a magazine. If you look on the bottom right of the screen, you can see that I'm getting ammo back on my gun. And they also, the cannons at least, deal bonus incendiary damage based on how full your gun ammo is. If you've got a full magazine, the turrets will shoot exploding bullets instead. You can also press F whilst the cannons are active to cause Rafa to consume no ammo, but the duration runs out a lot faster. And again, on screen, you can see me just shooting, not running out of ammo until the cannons have run out. As you get deeper into the tree, it starts to branch off in different paths, and so going on to the left-hand side one, we have Hell in a Shell, where if you press F while the cannons are active, it will fire out these 2 big firebombs that do incendiary damage. It does have a larger cooldown, 50 seconds. You can see it in the middle of your screen, just at the bottom there, and killing enemies with it partially restores this skill's cooldown. So if you get a lot of eliminations, then yeah, you can probably get the cooldown pretty quickly back on Hell in a Shell. The middle augment is the Instafort battle system, where your cannons now deal ordnance damage, which is your grenade slot, your rocket launcher slot, as you've been maybe seen in some other gameplay, and you deal increased ordnance damage while the cannons are active. If you press F whilst the cannons are also active, it causes them to disconnect and turn into a turret that will begin firing at enemies in place. If you have a grenade equipped, it will fire your equipped grenade at enemies, but if you don't, it will occasionally fire just normal grenades at targets. You can also press the action skill button again to have the turret companion jump back onto your back, and you can do this forwards and backwards, but naturally there's a duration that's going to run out. And then finally, for augments, you have unmissable missiles, where if you press F whilst the Peacebreaker Cannons are active, it will cause them to fire a volley of homing missiles at enemies, but it will just cut off some of the action skill max duration if you keep spamming this. But that is not all. You have the capstones as well. If you get towards the end of the tree, you get these certainly like super abilities almost. And for Rafa, a lot of them change just how his Peacebreaker cannons function. Instead of being cannons, they're replaced with shotguns for the first one, for example, with the double or auto shot on the left-hand side. They deal increased damage, they have increased pellet count, and the turrets also gain a chance to ricochet off of targets, and critical hits will always ricochet, kind of like Jacob's guns. These are cool, seeing gameplay in the background. Don't really want to talk about them too much. I think I'd rather wait for that in the future. But they were a lot of fun, at least in like playing this level. The middle capstone is Beam Team, where your cannons are replaced with two beams, a shock one and a corrosive one. They automatically lock onto enemies in your view, and they may lock onto different enemies. I don't know if pinging them has them 100% lock on, or whether they're a bit more sporadic, but whenever you apply a status effect, corrosive, shock, incendiary, whichever, you gain increased action skill damage, and this effect stacks up to 50. So yeah, a lot of damage. And the final hollow point, it changes up the cannons yet again, but instead of being these cannons, they're replaced with rockets that deal splash damage. And that's pretty much it for the capstones on this one. Going over to the blue tree, which is People Person, the main ability is Apophis Lance, which is this big offhand arm cannon. When it is active, your gun in your normal hand decreases its gun handling. As you can see in the gameplay, it's a little bit harder to shoot and aim, but you can fire these big blasts out of shock ordnance damage. You get 3 charges at base level, you can increase it, but you can fire it as 3 smaller blasts or charge it up to do 1 big blast or a medium-sized blast and a small blast, etc. So yeah, you can do quite a lot with it. It does pretty good damage overall, but the augments allow you to do some pretty cool stuff with it as well. So Sangre por Sangre is one. This is a nice one because it's essentially if you consume all of your charges, you gain reduced like cooldown rate. So essentially if you use all 3 charges, it goes from a 20-second cooldown, which it is normally, to a 12-second cooldown. So it doesn't matter if it's fired in 3 blasts or 1 big charge, it just reduces the cooldown, which is a net buff. The other augment next to it is the battery subscription service, where you gain an extra charge. It doesn't matter if you do a big 4 blast if you want, which does more damage naturally, or 4 smaller blasts. Also, when you consume 4 more charges, you gain increased action skill potency too. So it does just more shock damage or electrocutes the enemies. I don't know what it means by potency, but I guess it just makes it stronger, flat out. Another augment is Oyoroyo down in the bottom left-hand corner, where your Apophis Lance gains critical hit chance at 40%, and whenever you damage an enemy with the lance, you also gain further increased critical hit chance with, I guess, pretty much everything else. So this is good if you want to just blast smaller blasts to just keep that critical hit chance up. So yeah, the middle augment is Gibistruct Module. Whenever Rafa kills an enemy with the lance, you spawn a free grenade on that enemy. If Rafa has a grenade equipped, it spawns a copy of that grenade instead. You can see from the gameplay that I had this like corrosive bouncing Betty, and so every time I got a kill, you could see it just spawn on top of them. So if you get a really cool grenade, there's a lot of really cool builds around this augment that you can make. And finally, for augments in this tree, Engorged Boar, Apophis Lance gains increased projectile radius and projectile speed. For Project Gorgon, which is one of the capstones, you gain number of chains, but we'll go over that in a second. It just makes the blast bigger and faster and a lot cooler looking, but it doesn't increase any of its damage as such, so fairly standard. But moving on to the capstones, these abilities change up quite a lot for Apophis Lance. For Project Raiju, it's now a close-range shocking taser. You can see, again, from the gameplay, you can press the button down and it will deal shock damage in an arc in front of you. The longer that you hold down this attack, the greater damage it deals. However, if you look in the bottom left, you can see that it still works the same way as Apophis Lance, that you have charges. So you can either just press them one at a time during its like 20-second duration or whatever it is, press it when you need it, or you can hold it down to do more shock damage in this area. So it's not something that you could just have like 100% uptime on, like a lot of people maybe thought. The other capstone is Project Basilisk in the middle tree, where the lance now fires a corrosive blob that deals corrosive hazard and splits into several smaller projectiles. You can fire this as 3 blasts if you want, or more if you build around having more charges, or you can hold down the button to do a big blob of this corrosive and it splits off into more pieces. The final capstone in this tree is Project Gorgon, where the lance is now a laser beam that does fire damage. Similar to the taser, you can either press it during its duration 3 times or 4 times, however many charges you might have, to do just a bit of damage, or you can hold the button down, have it chained for longer, and it will do more damage. And like you saw with the augment before, it can chain to different enemies, and you can increase how many times it chains too. And finally, the green gimmick tree, and the ability is Arc Knives, where you put down your guns and you bring out these melee weapons that are called Arc Knives. And there's 3 main like abilities within this one to keep track of. If you press left click or primary fire, you'll deal melee damage with Rafa's Arc Knives. This isn't shock damage at all from the normal just left click, it's worth iterating that for a particular reason. If you press right click or your secondary fire, you'll dash forward and perform a dash attack that does shock melee attack. And then if you press F, you will unleash Rafa's Blade Fury, which deals shock damage to all marked enemies, and it also ends the skill. Marked enemies are those that you hit. You'll see these like little markers on top of enemies and how many stacks of it. Increases the damage done to those targets. The duration is 25 seconds, but the cooldown is 45, so it's quite long, and you don't get any of that cooldown refunded when you end the skill because of the Blade Fury element of it too. But moving on to the augments, whenever Raph kills an enemy with Altered Cabron, whilst the Arc Knives are active, it restores a portion of your health, so long as you're down on health. And whenever you gain health, you start to deal bonus corrosive damage with all of your attacks, and you gain increased movement speed. This effect also stacks up to 25. Again, if you look in the bottom left, you can see the buff and how many stacks I've got, and also if you look at the damage that I'm doing to some of these enemies, you can see that there's a little extra bonus corrosive damage attached to it. Next door in the main tree is Dead Man Walking as an augment. Arc Knives do not end when the duration runs out, instead they only end if Rafa enters Fight for Your Life or activates Blade Fury. The Arc Knives duration is depleted, Rafa loses health instead. You can see when the duration runs out and you start taking health damage, and whenever you damage an enemy, you gain overshield. Bottom left augment is Thundercutter. Attacks made with Arc Knives deal shock melee splash damage, and Rafa gains increased splash damage too. So now your normal melee attacks with the left click do shock damage now, much like your right click would do, and it could also increase just general splash damage that you do from everything, I think, whilst the augments and the abilities are active. The middle augment is Parting Gift. Whenever Rafa activates his dash attack, his secondary fire right click, you leave behind a grenade. If he has a grenade equipped, it uses that grenade instead, and enemies damaged by these grenades become marked. Whenever Rafa applies a mark to an enemy, apply an additional mark. This was a weird one because every time I used it, it seemed like I was throwing a grenade instead of having it left behind where I am. But it seems more like just a distance ranged attack more so than something that you'd use whilst you're in the thick of it. You can sort of see from the gameplay me just yeeting these grenades out into the distance, the Sin Bouncing Betty, the corrosive one. The final augment is Acid Drop. Your dash attack, your right click, is replaced by a leap, causing you to leap forward and create a caustic hazard wherever you land. Whenever a mark is removed from an enemy, it explodes in a corrosive nova. But moving on to the capstones, on the left-hand side we have Hurricane Especial. Activating Blade Fury causes Rafa to spin his blades, creating a singularity that draws in all marked enemies and other nearby enemies while dealing continuous shock damage. Whenever this attack kills an enemy, Overdrive grants increased action skill cooldown rate. Inferno Protocol is the middle capstone where Arc Knives are active. Your exosuit stores all damage dealt to you, and the exosuit then heats up and constantly deals a small amount of fire damage to him. Additionally, Rafa's melee attacks start dealing fire damage. A portion of the damage dealt to Rafa is also dealt to enemies he has marked. You can see the effect around me of just being red and on fire and stuff. And then when you use Blade Fury to end the Arc Knives and you consume all of this stored damage, it deals bonus incendiary damage based on all of the stored damage that was done to you, and a portion of that damage dealt this way is returned to Rafa as health. And the final capstone to highlight for Rafa is Galvanic Panic. Whenever you perform a melee attack with the Arc Knives, with your left click you fire an acid stream glider. These gliders deal splash damage, corrosive splash damage, and it's based on the number of total marked enemies. Additionally, killing an enemy with Arc Knives being active restores duration. If you activate Blade Fury, you fire out a volley of acid stream gliders in front of him, and it also ends the ability too. So this, again, is one that you don't actually need to use from melee, as you've seen from gameplay. This is more of like a ranged one. So, I mean, the majority of gameplay that you're going to see in the background is going to be from this capstone because it was really fun to play around. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Like I said earlier, if you want to see Hallow, Vex, or Eamon next, gameplay-wise, showcasing them, do let me know, and I'll put it out as soon as possible. You guys can vote for it, and I'll go for what's most popular. Naturally, I'm still embargoed, so there's only so much I can talk about, but if you do have questions, feel free to submit them below, and I will answer them whenever I can. And I can't wait to show you guys more stuff. But like this video, subscribe, hit the notification if you want to know as soon as these videos go live, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!